to. There's so many things.
You are recording. Woohoo!
I am recording, and I'm just going to see if this is actually working. Yep. Okay, cool. Okay. We're going to go, and if more people come, then that's just a bonus. And I'll try to kind of watch, but I don't want to hear that. Okay, so welcome to the weekly. I'm going to just change my view here for a second. No, I want that. Okay. So whether you are here in the Zoom, or maybe you're catching this on Facebook later, or live, or later with recording, or however you're here, I just want to welcome you and I want to thank you for coming. This has sort of been an idea that I've had in the background of my mind for a while, but kind of always caught up in the internal dialogue of like, well, what if nobody comes? What if there's nobody listening? And that's just, I don't really, it's not going to be a determining factor for this anymore. So this is, the intention behind this is to create dialogue around nutrition, to give you some different ideas, to offer some new ways of doing things, maybe things that you haven't tried before. And it's here as a resource, and I want it to be available to whoever needs it. So if you know people that are, you know, kind of on their own nutrition journey and you want to invite them into this space, that's great. I just want this to be accessible for people. So hence why all of the different things happening, and we will go with the flow. The conversation today that I wanted to start with is all around cravings. And if you've seen my posts around this, this is probably the biggest, if I want to say, barrier or challenge or theme that comes up for people that I work with around nutrition for various reasons. And it's hard. It's really hard for a lot of people for a lot of us to manage and to navigate and to kind of peel back the layers, so to speak, of what is really going on. And so what I have in my own journey, and then through the training and things, the things that I've learned, is that I really believe that we can access cravings from a different perspective. We can think about them in a different way. And the first thing that I want to just invite you into with this idea of nutrition is that, and I posted about this morning, but like, what if we were just coming from a place of our body was actually doing exactly what it was supposed to do with the information that we had given it? So, you know, some people will come to a conversation about nutrition because they're not happy with their weight, or they're experiencing they're having an ailment pop up, something to do with their skin or their heart or their blood sugar or their guts, whatever it is. And they come to food for answers. And we always kind of come in with this, well, something is wrong, and so I need to fix it. But what if actually your body was just doing what it was supposed to be doing? The information that it had been given over a period of time was producing results. And perhaps the message simply from the body is that it needs some new information from you. So we can access the information about the physical, the physiology of the body. We can access information about food and foods, specific foods that will support specific things, specific body systems. But we can also access the mind and the heart, the emotions, the spirit. And if we can incorporate all these things, especially when we're talking about cravings, I think that the path can become much less clouded for us. We should have a deeper understanding from many. Nothing is happening by itself, right? It's all connected. So we get to put these pieces together. But kind of coming into this from like, we're not, sometimes we have hard stuff that we have to go through, but maybe we're not broken. Maybe we just need new information. Our body needs something different. We need change. So if you are here, and if you are like listening live, or if you're coming in after, I'd encourage you to grab some paper or a journal or something and be open to writing things down. If you don't have time to write them down in the moment, go back, because I am going to give you some questions and things that you can think about later, and to dig into them a little bit, because sometimes not everything will bubble up all at the same time. So the first thing that I wanted to get into is just the physiology, the body piece, the physical piece. And to do that, I'm going to share my whiteboard with you, which is, if I can figure out how to do that again. Share. It's not gonna let me share. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna draw you a little picture about what's happening here inside the body when we eat. Or when we, okay, so here we go. Typically, when people talk to me about cravings, they go straight into sugar. I crave sugar. I crave sweet things, sugar, and we call it sugar, okay? But what I want you to think about today, and I'll debrief this for you in a second, is carbohydrates. Okay, now there's a whole thing, there's so many different things in the nutrition industry about the foods that you should be eating and you shouldn't be eating, okay? Carbohydrates are not bad. There's a whole stream in nutrition that says cut them all out, don't eat them, they're bad. They're not bad. They're our energy source, okay? They give us fuel. But when we talk about sugar, what we have to understand is that carbohydrates convert to glucose in our system, all of them. At some point in the digestive process, they break down into glucose. So a lot of people will tell me, they're like, well, I crave sweet things. Okay. Yeah, totally. Not bad. They are not bad. But I crave sweets. And we get into our head about that. So we think about sugar, but we have to understand that carbohydrates actually become sugar. They become glucose at some point in the journey. Now, where I want to move this little thingy here. How do I do that? There we go. Sorry, I'm adjusting things on my screen. So what we need to think about, and we'll get into this in a minute, is actually just the kind of carbohydrates, okay? Because they're not all created equal. And we need them at different times for different things. So let me just do a little more typing here on my screen. We're going to talk about this guy, pancreas, and we're going to talk about digestion. And then we are going to also talk about the blood. So we've got our little, there's our pancreas. Here's our blood. Well, this, I guess, would be like a vein with blood in it. Okay. Blood. And then this is our three things: liver, not lives, liver, muscles, and okay. So here's our little picture. We eat carbohydrates. Okay. They break down into glucose into our bloodstream. And when this happens, our blood sugar goes up. Okay, so we get glucose into the bloodstream. Our pancreas recognizes that. It sends insulin into our body. Okay, and then what you want to think about insulin as he's like the doorman. I love this analogy that I learned. Insulin goes and knocks, its job is to push glucose into cells because that's what cells need for energy. Okay, so it's going to push it either into the liver for storage, it's going to push it into the muscles for muscular energy, or it's going to push it into fat cells. So insulin comes over here and knocks on the door of either the liver, the muscles, or the fat cells, and basically says, let the glucose in. Okay, and this happens every time, little while after we eat carbohydrates. Now, if we eat straight up table sugar, really, really sweet things, or very starchy carbohydrates, this happens faster. If we eat carbohydrates that require more work from us, like more chewing, more fiber, or we eat things that have protein and fat with carbohydrate, then this process slows down. Okay. But what happens in our world is that there's actually such an abundance of carbohydrate foods and foods that have sugar added to them that we get into this state. And I'm going to use the term insulin resistance, but I'm not saying this is where everybody's at, but this is what's starting to happen, is that we're eating so many carbohydrates that insulin is going into the blood. It's knocking on the doors and it's knocking on the door and it's knocking on the door. And eventually these cells, the doors stop opening. The cells stop listening. They just become resistant to this constant knocking saying, hey, let the sugar in, let the sugar in, let the glucose in. So what we end up with actually is two things that are happening. We end up with really high blood sugar because the glucose can't get into the cells where it needs to go. And we end up with cells that are starved for energy because the glucose can't get in. And what this causes is cravings. On a cellular level, our cells do not have the energy that they need. And so our body, being so intelligent and so smart and always trying to work for homeostasis and balance in our system, is telling us to eat. And what is it telling us to eat? It's telling us to eat carbohydrates, starchy, sweet things, because it needs energy, but the energy can't get where it needs to go. So this is a cycle that happens when carbohydrates are a really dominant part of the things that we eat, especially ones that break down really quickly. Okay, and this is the cycle of craving. So again, your body's doing what it's supposed to do. It's just got a little bit out of balance. It needs some different information from you. Okay, this is one reason cravings happen. Another reason is because of stress. Okay, so you're probably familiar with the fight or flight response, right? So acute stress, tiger in the jungle coming to get you, body goes into fight or flight as a safety mechanism, right? It's keeping us safe, it's survival. We are very well adapted, right? Our brain is like, nervous system is primed to keep us safe. So the stress alarms go off, and the one of the main hormones, cortisol, that is secreted or released into the system is cortisol. And this is a catabolic hormone. So its job is to pull energy from tissues, from proteins, from wherever it can for fast fuel. There's no time to digest food for energy when there's a tiger chasing you, right? So cortisol does its job breaking things down, pushing glucose into the blood so that we have energy to escape or to fight. Okay. And then what happens again is that we end up in this state where our cells have had energy depleted from them. They don't have enough. And so our cells want more energy. And where do they get that from? They get it from sugar. They get it from carbohydrates and glucose. So this is a really simplified kind of explanation of some of the things that are going on when we experience cravings. And the reason I share this is because I believe it gives us just a view of what's actually, again, body working well, we're doing what it's supposed to do, but the outside circumstances, information are causing it to shift into an overdrive or to shift out of balance. So we, instead of getting into cycles of shame and guilt and judgment about what's happening with our body or what we're doing, and we feel like we have no control over anything, if we can understand that this is working as it's supposed to based on the information that it has, then maybe we can peel back some of those feelings that just add actually to the stress response. Okay, and recognizing that it's not usually the tiger that's after us, right? That stress for most of us now is prominent daily in multiple different, it's worries, it's fears, it's daily hassles, it's things that we perceive, something we're worried about in the future, something that we don't like or was hard in the past, and we bring it. That's all stress that we create or that we perceive moment to moment. And when that's happening all the time, then these cycles are just running. So again, we get to change the information that our body has and create a different result. Now, knowing this doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be super easy to shift your cravings. I will also say, just before I turn off the whiteboard here, that another piece of this is that we actually get a bit of a dopamine hit when we consume these sweet foods. And the dopamine is, again, another trained mechanism in our body because, we as creatures on the planet, we needed sweet things to survive. We needed, a long time ago when food wasn't available everywhere, we had to find food and we would seek out the things that were sweet, right? We knew that the things that were bitter or sour or really pungent, that they might be harmful to us. We're like primed to find the sweet things. And so when we get that reward, that dopamine hit in the mind, then it's a reward system. We go after it again. again and again and again. So there's all these things working in our body. That I think if we can understand that first, that's not bad. It just might need to shift a bit for us. Okay. So I'm going to, do I want to close this? Yeah, I think I'll close this. Okay. Okay. So that's like the physiology basic. Not, it's way more complicated than that, but that's like the Reader's Digest version. So the other pieces of this that absolutely play a role for us are, I'm going to list them all right now, and we're going to kind of go into them. Desires, okay, pleasure, shame, and guilt. Okay, and these all are a part of the experience of cravings. Okay, so before I dive into desire, if you have a piece of paper, I just want you to take a moment and write down, if there was no logical reasoning as to why you couldn't or shouldn't or can't do something, what do you want in your life? What would you desire? And if the word desire is triggering for you because it's like, well, desires are bad, that's wrong, we don't go there, we don't talk about those, like, acknowledge that. Okay, but really, like, what would you want? It's been quite interesting, both for myself and working with clients, when I talk to them and I ask them, like, if there were no parameters, what would you really want? And they don't know, or they can't voice it, they can't speak it. And maybe that resonates with you. I know that it resonates with me at different points in my journey, but like, what would you just dream of? Right? Like, what is fun? What feels good? What would you want life to feel like? And it's absolutely essential that we spend time in that dreaming space, that desire space. When we're thinking about what we need, needs are basic survival things. We need food, water, shelter. You could argue we need money, right? Needs. That comes first. The thing that comes after needs is pleasure. You think about your work day. You're doing the 9-to-5 job, you work hard all day, you come home. Often, what do you look for? You look for pleasure. The needs are met, and then we look for pleasure, the enjoyment piece. And that's where the desire is. Desire is really like a spiritual and an emotional impulse that inspires us to move towards something. Okay? It helps us embrace change. If we don't have a desire for anything, then why would we move? Right? Why would we create change? There's no impetus for us to move forward if there isn't something out there that we want. And so the emotions are all wrapped up in our senses. So if we're not allowing ourselves to kind of experience desire and acknowledge desire, we're just shutting things down. We're shutting down the emotions, we're shutting down sensory experience. And it's really difficult to feel into things when we don't have any desire for what it could become. Okay. So you can think of how we're talking about carbohydrates as fuel. Think about desire as fuel. Okay. If we don't acknowledge our desires, we are literally shutting off the energy for change. Okay. The desires fuel our will. And it's our will that gives us that like power to move into the things that we want, especially if they're not easy, right? We have to have that determination, the will to do that. So what has been really, really helpful for me in my journey with food, with being sick, with healing, all the things, is the chakra system. And I will show you the book, which I reference often in my work with clients and in my own thing. It's called Eastern Body, Western Mind. And this is basically a combination of psychology and the chakra system, kind of bridging the two. It's fascinating. But what it helped me to do was to understand where, when I had physical ailments popping up in my body, it helped me to understand what was happening in the mind and the emotions and how that translated into energy blocks, basically in certain body systems and certain nerve houses in the body. So desire, when we talk about desire, that is the like the fueling, the drive in the sacral chakra or the second chakra. Where our first chakra, our root, is all about grounding. It's about stability. It's about finding our feet and our, like, groundedness in our space, in our world. But the sacral chakra is all about movement. And we know that in order to move, we have to have a desire or something that is propelling us into that movement space. So it's like, again, like once our needs are met, the root chakra, the needs, basic foundation is met, then we look to pleasure, and that is the second chakra. So pleasures and desires, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have, in our world, often in different religious practices, desire and pleasure are shamed, right? We don't go to them. They're not what we should be doing. We should be doing the ABC. We don't want to spend time in what we desire to do, or the pleasure of experiences. Perhaps that means we're selfish, or there's all these stories wrapped up in these things, and we get very focused on all of the logical, right? We have to do all the things, and that's what we should do, so that's what we do, and we again just cut off this desire piece. Okay, but you think about it, like, what do we crave? We crave pleasure, right? We crave the sweetness in our day, in our food, whatever it could be. We crave these things. We desire them. So I like to look at cravings as actually things that we are desiring to have more of in our life. It might show up as food. It might show up as a relationship. It might show up as time. It might show up as money, whatever, right? They're all connected. Okay, but what we have to understand is that these desires, they're not wrong. Naturally, they're not wrong. They're a part of our experience. And so we can actually embrace them. And when we allow ourselves to fully experience the things that we desire without getting into the dialogue of, well, no, but you shouldn't have that, or no, but if you have that, that means this, then we allow ourselves to experience the full emotion of those things. And it's satisfying. It's satisfying when we actually acknowledge that that was super pleasurable, or that we really enjoyed something, right? So the kind of the counter of desire that lives in the sacral chakra is guilt. Okay, and the two, I'm sure you can right away see the juxtaposition of the two, right? We have the things that we desire, but we feel guilty for desiring. Or we have so for food, right? We have the thing that we want to eat, we eat it, and then we feel guilty about it. We crave the alone time, but then we feel guilty for giving ourselves the alone time because that means we're selfish. There's all of that wrapped up in there. And really what ends up happening is we get in a place where we restrict, and we are trying to always control things, because in the background, guilt is like sitting on our shoulder, like the little devil, like you have your angel and your devil, and we've got guilt here, right? Trying to control things for us. So what happens with eating and with cravings, if we're getting into like these emotions and how they're impacting us, for eating, this can actually lead us into things that are more impulsive, or that we feel we don't have a lot of control over, because guilt prevents us from fully experiencing the pleasure of the moment. That first experience, if you go take a bite of cake and you fully allow all the sweetness, the taste, all of the pleasure, like all of it, if you did it slow enough and you allowed it to really soak in, you might find that you maybe didn't even need the whole piece of cake. Like how much satisfaction we can pull from our experiences when we fully allow ourselves to embrace them. And this is where guilt shuts us down. But there is a really, really healthy place for guilt too. This is another one of those, like it's always the bad thing, right? Guilt is so bad. Well, no, it actually is a teacher for us. So if we can come to a place in our experience where we have the awareness that we feel the guilty feeling pop up. Oh, I shouldn't be having this bath right now because my kids are upstairs and my husband's alone with my kids. Okay, there's some guilt coming in there. If I can see that, just recognize it, it can kind of be the window through which I can start to look at how guilt is operating in my life, how I can like examine behaviors before, during, and after, and I can create some boundaries around that experience for myself. So if I'm in the bath and guilt is coming in because I feel like I should be being a better mom or I'm not being a good enough mom, well, what is the feeling that came up before I decided to have that bath? The feeling was just, I could use some alone time, or I need some time to decompress. The feeling in the middle of it is, this is beautiful. I love this, right? I feel so good. The feeling after, there's probably enjoyment there, but is the guilt coming in? So we can look at these different aspects of the experience, and guilt just becomes a lens, a window, an opportunity to extract a different message out of that. So I get to actually create a boundary there, and I'm just saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to feel guilty about this because this is really important for me as a person. Or I see that guilt popping up, but that's a really old story. I know that that was something that my mom did, or that was something I saw my aunt or my sister do. And now it gives us perspective. When we internalize guilt, it becomes toxic. It keeps us stuck. It shuts off desire. When we embrace it as the teacher, it creates movement, because we get the opportunity to observe things and then ultimately decide if that's the path. Okay, so guilt is a big one. Some questions, okay? Remember that the energy in the second chakra with desire is all about movement and change and flow. Guilt stops it. So we want to be able to kind of have some questions that we can ask ourselves. And so this would be an exercise that I would like encourage you to journal about. I will post some of these questions in the group after the fact if you want to go back and look at them. But things like what were the forces acting on you when you made that decision in the moment? Like what was the situation you were in? Okay, what were you trying to satisfy when you made that decision? So if we're thinking about food, what were you trying to satisfy when you ate the ice cream? Or not even the ice cream, the potato. Like it could be anything, right? I think I go to the, I guess I'm going to the things that I typically hear people talk about feeling guilty about. Perhaps a question even of like, where did you see this behavior modeled for you in your life? Could be in the past, could be current, okay? How can my underlying needs or desires be met? So if there is something that you really want, how do you get it? Like get into the fun of thinking about that. Okay, and another piece is just forgiveness, right? How do I forgive myself? Because often we, as we start to do this work, then we're guilty about having felt guilty all of that time. And so we can just shed a lot of forgiveness on that part of ourselves, right? Lots of love. Where is the origin of the belief that pleasure is bad? Where did that come from for you? Okay. And then what are the results of the actions you are taking? Like get honest with yourself. If after dinner every night you have a habit of grabbing for things that you know aren't necessarily supporting you, but you feel this uncontrollable urge, or things just take over and you go through the process, like what is the result of that? Is that what you desire? Okay, is it causing harm to you? Is it causing harm to others? Like dig into that and get really honest with yourself, and then ask yourself if you can ask for help or support, because maybe that's something you desire. Okay, so there's lots to unpack there with the guilt piece, but lean into the desire piece, because I will tell you that is the fun piece. And not everything when we talk about food has to feel heavy and hard all the time. Okay, where is the funness? That's a good energy to settle into. Okay, so we talked about needs, root chakra, desire, second chakra, and then The third chakra is actually like the solar plexus, so right in the belly. And this is all about action. So you can see how these things kind of build on each other, right? We have the foundation, we have movement, and then action. Like we take action from the will that we have in our gut, in our solar plexus. So this is all about acting, like acting and being an individual and following your truth as an individual. Okay. Often we can feel really powerless, or like we're in that space, often very fascinated by like the successes or the triumphs of other people. And this has certainly been something for me, always like, admiring the other women that I know that are doing this or doing that, and kind of idolizing them in their power, right? We see it in others, and yet we lack it in ourselves. And so this area in the body is kind of like we're battling for power or control over ourselves, because we don't feel like we have enough of it within us, that we're looking for other ways to fill it. Okay. We search outside of us, and often that can come in the form of reaching for foods or things that we put in to fill that space. Okay, so this area of the body is all about reclaiming your personal power, with the understanding that it is already inside of you, everything that you need, and it's always been there. Okay. When it comes into this space, this is a lot about choice, and we make choice based on our will to do something. Okay. And so this is taking our activities, so things that we're doing daily, maybe with food, and we're transforming them into willed decisions or willed activities, things that we are choosing because we have this fire burning inside of us that gives us the strength to follow that. Okay, our personal power. And so when we're in this space, the emotion that we often will battle, or that comes up to shut us down, is shame. And this is the other one that most people, when I'm talking about cravings, this is the one that a lot of people are experiencing, myself included, have been in this path. So we say that like shame is like the demon of the third chakra. Although I don't really love that language, because again, I think it has something to teach us. So we feel ashamed of ourselves or of something we decided to do. And behind that, it basically means that we believe that our basic instincts are wrong. We can't trust what is within us. So the mind must control, right? So if you're a person that tends to overthink things, this is the mind grasping, right? Trying to overtake what we have an intuitive internal knowing of, but we don't necessarily believe it. Okay. So we get kind of stuck in these shame-bound activities and impulses and repetitive behavior. And this is a cycle of cravings that comes up for us too. We grab for the food, we feel the shame, and then we grab for the food again to fill the empty space or to fill that feeling that we don't like. And it continues over and over. Shame is like kind of landing ourselves in suffering. It's in this repetitive space, and it can feel super heavy. So again, we get to start to peel this back. And it starts with just recognizing that it's there, honestly, that when I eat this, or when I have the craving and I do this and shame pops up, that shame is a feeling that, just recognize that it's there, acknowledge it. Because the more we try to pretend that it's not, or we try to push it away, the more the cycle will continue. Okay. When we think about healing this, when we think about shifting out of shame, we want to think about stoking a fire. Okay, so the element of the third chakra, the element of the gut, right, that energy center in the body is fire. And if you think about digestion in itself, there's heat there, right? We want to, that's the kind of the fire that's breaking everything down. So when you're building a campfire, you can't just throw all the big logs on at once. You have to start with the kindling, right? Otherwise the fire goes out. And it's like that with food, you guys. If you try to do everything all at once and you're just like, I'm doing this, I'm going in 100%, and you make all the changes and you cut out all the things, all the big logs on the fire, and you might last a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, and it's out. The fire is out. Okay. Instead, focus on the kindling. Okay. Little bit at a time, small pieces of wood to stoke the heat of the fire. And that, because what that does is it builds belief. So when you do the one little thing, you build belief, and there's no shame there because you did it. Right? So you cut that shame cycle. Then you put another piece of kindling on, you build the belief, and the shame cycle is cut. And this is where we stop that repetition. Is it going to poke its head in for you? Probably yes, absolutely. But we get, with practice, we get to see it. So then we can say, oh, hello, there you are, Mr. Shame, Mrs. Shame. I see you there. Okay, I'm going to go back to my little piece of kindling. And it's practice. Okay, it's just practice, like anything else that we do or we try to get good at in our life. You want to think also in this space, working with shame, like the little pieces, right? Small pieces of kindling, but small pieces of nourishment, and focusing on the vegetables and the proteins. Okay, these are clean burning fuels for our body. They also, if we hop back to the physiological, they are not going to impact your blood sugar as the starchy carbohydrates will. So you're accessing two really important parts of that healing cycle there, right? The proteins and the veg stoke the fire, nourish the fire, and you're supporting the body at the same time, okay? And then more questions, like particularly, what activities energize you? Okay, like what, so I know in the exercise realm of things, right? Because we can always talk about how good exercise is for us, but are you shooting on your exercise, or do you actually just love it? Do you enjoy it? Maybe you don't love it all the time. That's okay. But do you enjoy it? Like, do you have to go to the gym and lift the heaviest weights as hard as you can every day, even when you don't feel like it? Or can you dive into that knowing inside of you that says, today I want to do yoga. Today I want to go for a run. Today I'm going to lift the weights. Today I want to try a karate class. Today I'm going dancing, right? That, like, what is it that brings you energy, and embrace that, right? That it doesn't always have to look the same, but it is, again, like energy is energy. It has to move. It has to move. And we want to build it, right? We want to elevate it. So what are the things that make you feel good? Because those are the elevating energies. Even if it's not exercise, like, what do you love to do? Again, this is this desire piece playing in, right? What do you love? Do it. Do it. Like, again, what do you love? What are you craving? Do it. If it is nourishing for you, do it. Couple other questions for this space. And I'm playing with the shame kind of theme. A lot of times when we've been in a shame cycle for a long time, there's a lot of fear that we feel shameful because we're not showing up the way we think we should, or we don't look the way we should, and there's shame behind that. So for people that are going through that, actually, sometimes we need to do nothing, but sometimes doing nothing can be really, really hard, because that spirals us into that shame conversation again. So just looking in that space, I guess, and asking questions around, like, why is it that I'm afraid to fail? Or why is it that this is the body that I will finally be validated in? Like, why is that the body that I feel like I have to have? Why is this the lifestyle that I feel like I have to have? Right? Just asking questions and allowing things to come up. When I'm critical of myself, whose voice do I resemble? Right? Like digging into these questions. Okay. So I got into guilt and shame because those are primarily the things that there's judgment too. Judgment is also housed in that third chakra, right? We shut things down when we judge ourselves. I know the judgment story well. With the coach that I worked with, my nickname was Judgy McJudgerson. Just constantly, well, it's not enough. Well, it's not good enough. Well, it's not gonna. And that all that we can peel so much of this back to just the lack that we have within ourselves. And we don't need to judge the fact that it's there, but we can explore, right? And come to a place where we can shine a lot of love and a lot of maybe forgiveness again onto that part of ourselves. All of this plays into the craving theme, okay? All of it. And I think that we will access, some of us will come to this conversation because of something happening in the body. And so that's what resonates best for us. Others will come into this conversation. Oh, Mary, that puppy looks so sweet behind you. He's so relaxed. Aw, I'll go do that after this is over. Or we have things going on in the mind or the emotions. And so we come to the conversation within ourselves in that respect. But I would encourage you to let each one of them be an opportunity to expand. Because I think the more that we can understand that everything is connected, it just gives us a bigger plate, I guess, and to access where these things are coming from and why they're taking shape in our life the way that they do. And when we can see them, we can start to change them. Okay. I wanted to share with you before we go a couple of things that have been very, very helpful in terms of actually making some of these shifts, these emotional shifts, right? There's a whole other subconscious piece to this conversation, but that would take us probably down a whole nother rabbit hole. Maybe we'll save that for another day. Years and years and years ago, when I was really struggling with my ulcerative colitis, my naturopath prescribed tapping to me. And if you're familiar with tapping, emotional freedom technique, I believe it's called. I was like 23, 24, maybe at the time. I was at that point accessing my illness from a very physical piece, lots of food, lots of supplements, lots of stress reduction. I didn't understand the conversation about the subconscious or how the emotions were impacting my health or anything like that. But he was like, you're going to do tapping for 20 minutes a day. I was like, okay. So that was, 20 years ago. And all of a sudden it's come back into my life and in its own unique way. So I've been experimenting more with this and some really, really cool shifts. So I wanted to, and I'm just trying to think about what the best way to actually do this with you is. I think what I will do is I will drop a resource into the group for you. Basically what we do when we tap is that we kind of set the stage with what they call a setup phrase or the focus. And so we start with a phrase. So I'll use cravings in this, but it could be anything. Okay. So even though I experience cravings, I deeply and completely accept myself. And we repeat this out loud or mentally to ourselves while we tap. They call this the karate chop, tapping on the karate chop side of our hand. And basically this sets the stage subconsciously so that we're basically opening the subconscious to say, well, this is something that we're going to look at. Okay. This is all of these, the tapping points are basically acupressure points for the body. They help release stress. They help improve all kinds of different things going on in the body, but they also give us access to this kind of subconscious world, I'll say. So the first one is just setting the stage and you tap on the side, the karate chop. So even though I experience cravings, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then we move into different spots. And I haven't always done it this way, but everything that I've been reading about is that you then switch kind of into what's called the reminder phrase. So the reminder phrase is simply the problem. So then you would move into tapping. The next one is the top of your head. And you would say, this guilt and shame from cravings, this guilt and shame from cravings, this guilt and shame for cravings. And usually say it 3 times, and then you move to the next one, which is above the eyes, then beside the eyes, under the nose, under the chin, collarbones. I tap the heart. That's not necessarily in the thing, and then under the arms. So I will put a resource in for you for this. I would also, like I said, that reminder phrase, I have found for me, it feels better to actually repeat the whole thing. So even though I experience cravings, I deeply and completely accept myself, versus saying something like, this guilt and shame from cravings. So the science behind this says that it's a reminder of the problem so that you're accessing it. My vibe from it is like, well, I keep talking about the problem, and I want to keep focusing on this completely accepting myself. So I would encourage you to play with it a little bit if this is something that you want to try. Like I said, I'll put a graphic into the group about where the actual tapping points are and kind of break down the steps. But this is such a cool piece of, this is the healing, right? That we don't get to decide how healing happens for us. If you're working with food in whatever way in your life, I guarantee you there are emotions, subconscious thoughts, beliefs that are impacting your choices. That's for all of us. Okay. So it's like, you would be abnormal if that wasn't the case. This is the stuff that allows us to access that, the stuff that is unseen, the stuff that doesn't make any sense, the stuff that we can't quantify, right? But it's there. And so these are the pieces that, you know, while you work on the food choices, while you work on giving your body the proteins and the vegetables and the carbohydrates that you have to work to break down, while you're doing that, you're supporting yourself fully with, I'm also going to access this kind of magical, unseen, emotional, deep-rooted part of my experience, because we all have them. Tapping is a really cool way to do that. So I'll give you some of that. The other piece that I just wanted to mention to you, because it's been very impactful in my journey, is Reiki. Reiki is energy healing. Some people who practice Reiki, I put hands on. I know others, it's kind of your hands hover. It does no harm. It basically moves energy that you already have within you. The person doing the Reiki is just a channeler, essentially. What is fascinating with Reiki is that we can heal the person in the moment. We can access healing for them. They can access their own healing, but we can also heal from the past. We can heal the version of us in the past that experienced the trauma or experienced the challenges or took those beliefs and you know, kind of tucked them into the subconscious that are still there. I had this experience a little while back where, you know, I've come a long way in my nutrition journey, and there's a lot of things about it that I feel really good about. Not the same person I used to be, you know, but there are still things that come up. And sometimes I get into the frustrated space of like, but I thought I figured that out, right? All of this stuff is going like it's supposed to, and it feels awesome and it's great. And yes. And then there'll be this thing, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? Right? It's because we carry all of our experiences from when we're like 2 years old, when you're in the womb, ancestors, we carry it all with us. And so the Reiki piece for me is getting out of the linear concept of time in healing and allowing ourselves to, like, it's more than just the me that's sitting here right now that maybe isn't happy with the way that I'm eating. Where did that start? I can actually experience healing on the 13-year-old me that hated my body, right? That's where I want to do some healing right now. And we can do that through Reiki. This actually only came up for me a few weeks ago, and it was just blew me wide open. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the unworthy Diane. That's the, you know, I'm like, I feel worthy now. Sure didn't then. Well, let's do some healing there, right? And that's the really cool piece about the Reiki. And again, it's not like the person doing the Reiki is doing anything to you. They're just helping you channel energy where your body needs it. And it's so beautiful. So if I know again, the rabbit hole is deep in this conversation with cravings, but I hope that makes a little bit of sense about the body piece. Thanks, Mary. Like what's actually happening? Like give yourself a break. Your body's doing what it's supposed to do. It just needs something different from you. Different information creates a different result. If you're ready to look at that, that's amazing. Okay, go with it. Oh, I can hear my husband just got home if you hear voices in the background. Then don't discount the unseen, the feelings, the thoughts from now and from a long time ago. Okay, it all is a part of your experience today, and you absolutely can dive into all of it. It can sound like a lot, but there are so many amazing pieces of the puzzle for you to uncover through that process. And one of the reasons, I'll just say this before I go, that I love the nutrition piece is that it is so connected in every aspect of our life, right? Yes, we need food. It's a need, right? Physical needs for survival, but it's also deeply woven into our relationships. It's deeply woven into celebration. It's deeply woven into like growing up and nourishment and like the whole, right? There's so many things, and they're all connected. So I think, you know, whatever is going on in your journey, whatever part of your journey you're on, if there's niggles coming up for you about nutrition or food or how you nourish yourself, like access that, because when you dive into that, the ripple of that goes into everything else. So it's pretty magnanimous, I will say. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for the first Conversations Weekly. Mary, thank you so much for coming on Zoom with me. I really, really appreciate that. And for any of you that are live in the group, I haven't been looking, so I have no idea if you're there. Thanks. If you're catching the recording, amazing. Again, I know I kind of went down the hole of all the things. So if you have questions, just shoot me a message. Love chatting about this stuff. And yeah, next week, I decided when I was walking this morning, I believe we're going to get into digestion a little bit more. We talked about that third chakra today. Okay, that's a big piece of that stoking the fire, digestive fuel, digestive fire, and also a little bit connected to the carbohydrate conversation with things that I've learned over the years. So I think that'll be a good next step in these conversations. But again, yeah, I'll share more info as it comes. And thank you again, and have an amazing day. And hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks, Mary. Bye.